So you've gone and done it. You've bought a whetstone. You've watched enough videos to make you blue in the face, yet somehow you've ended up with a knife that was worse than when you started off with. Believe me, I understand this. It took me months to figure out what I was doing wrong. And there wasn't just one thing, there were multiple things I needed to fix. So today, I want to show you how I have learned over many months to sharpen my knives to a hair-whittling edge. I'll walk you through 4 common mistakes that are often tripping many people up. If you fix them, odds are you'll have a sharp knife in no time. And if you watch to the end, I've got a 5th and final tip that may be the difference between having a sharp knife or having a dull knife. So let's get straight into that. So that brings us to mistake number 1, having an inconsistent angle. This is the first and by far the biggest mistake that people make. And it's also why people typically struggle at the beginning, because there's no muscle memory that has been formed. When you start with your whetstone, you don't actually know how to hold the knife properly and how to lock it in place. So I've got a way to fix this, and it will take some time and it will take some practice, but with this tip, I guarantee you'll get there. To fix this problem, you're going to need a Sharpie. So before you sharpen your knife, take your Sharpie and color the edge in, right on the bevel. And that's it. Now when you're sharpening, the stone will only remove the marker where it's making contact with the stone. And this makes all the difference. If the marker is disappearing above the edge, your angle is too low. In fact, you're not even reaching the edge. But if you're only removing a thin sliver from the top of the edge, your angle is too high. Now you'll know if your angle is right if you're taking off the marker evenly across the whole edge. But there's more to it than that. Once you've found that angle using your Sharpie trick, you need to look at what your wrist is doing when you're sharpening the knife. The secret is in locking your wrist. You can't let it flop around. All the movement really comes from your elbows and from your shoulders. The moment your wrist starts moving is the moment you've lost the angle, even if you don't realize it. And a moving angle means that you never get a sharp edge. So, set the angle, lock your wrist, and keep everything rigid as you sharpen your knife. And the good news is you can reapply that marker as many times as you want. If you want to get rid of that marker, if there's some still left on your knife, you can just run some hand sanitizer over it and you can just wipe off any excess marker. So I would recommend doing this every time you sharpen. Over time, you will figure out what the right angle feels like, and you'll be able to lock it in every single time. And eventually, you won't even need that Sharpie anymore. But until then, use the Sharpie relentlessly. Now, the second mistake is using the wrong amount of pressure. You're either using too much pressure or too little pressure. And this one catches people out because it can really throw off your technique. If you're pressing too hard, the angle collapses. Your wrist tenses up, your hand stiffens, and the angle gets all out of whack. But if you're not using any pressure at all, the knife will skid and skate around that whetstone and you won't actually be sharpening your knife. So how much pressure do you actually need? A good reference point is between 4 to 6 pounds of pressure for typical normal sharpening. If your knife is really dull, you can push that up to 8 pounds. If you're unsure about what those numbers feel like, which most people are, here is a great trick. We'll use a kitchen scale. You can see that will respond to pressure. That's exactly what it does. So we'll set our scale to pounds and we'll get the knife that we want to sharpen and we'll press it on there. And then you find that sweet spot. 4 to 6 pounds of pressure. And then you take that sensation and translate it directly onto the whetstone. But here's a really common issue, and this one's really easy to miss. If you feel your knife dragging or digging on the way up, well, that's usually a pressure problem. What's happening as you sweep the blade up, your angle is too high and the knife is digging into the stone. When that happens, do not push through. You'll damage both your stone and you'll damage your edge. If this happens, back off the pressure, lighten up, slow down, and focus on keeping that wrist locked in. So remember, you're not trying to muscle through this. Let the stone do the work. Your main goal in this is to try to be controlled and repeatable. Mistake number 3 is a really common one as well, and it's actually choosing the wrong grit too early. Quite often, people will start off with a stone with far too high a grit. They'll start at 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 grit, and they'll wonder why their knife isn't getting sharp. And the reason that would be is because they're not taking enough metal off their knife. They're not forming a new edge. It's a common misconception that the higher the grit is, the more work or the sharper your edge will be. The reality of the situation is the lower the grit you use, the more work is being done to the knife. So if we start on a 1000 grit stone, that's where the majority of the work is going to be done. From there, every step up that we do, we are just polishing that knife bit by bit. So in general, we have 3 categories of stones. We have low grit stones, medium grit stones, and high grit stones. The lower the grit is, the more work is being done to the knife. The higher the grit, the more polished and refined that will be, but we have to have done the work before with the lower stones. So we want to start off low, we want to go slow, and then we can work our way up towards the more polishing edge of the spectrum. As a general rule of thumb, I typically start at 1000 grit, then I go to 2000 grit, and then I go to 5,000 or 6,000 grit to finish things off. So how then would you know where to start? Well, it really depends on how dull your knife is. If you've gone years without sharpening your knife, you probably want to start quite low on the spectrum. If you can, a 400 grit stone would be perfect. Once you're finished with that 400 grit stone, we'll move up. We'll move up to a medium grit stone, something like a 1000 grit stone. And finally, once you're done with that medium grit stone, we'll move on to a high grit stone. And if you have no idea where to start, I'd recommend starting honestly at a 1000 grit stone. It's kind of the sweet spot. You can reset an edge and you can get a really sharp edge just using a 1000 grit stone. Mistake number 4 is related to mistake number 3, and it's actually switching stones too early. We want to wait until that burr is formed, particularly on those lower grit stones like 400 and 1000 and 2000, because we can still form a burr on those stones. So the job of those lower and medium grit stones is to set the edge. If we move up too early from a low or a medium stone up to a polishing stone before we've removed enough metal, we're never going to get a new edge and it's never going to be sharp. So we really want to be working with the burr. A burr is basically a tiny bit of metal that folds over the edge as you're sharpening. You won't always see it, but you can feel it, and this is how we would fix mistake number 4. You can feel for a burr on your knife using your finger. So I would take my knife and I would take my thumb and I would run my knife from the back of the knife to the front, going this way. You'll feel your thumb catch on that little bit of metal that has folded over. So the goal would be to be able to feel a burr from bottom to top of knife. So you should feel along your knife, is there a burr from bottom to top? And the moment you can feel a burr from the bottom of the knife to the top of the knife, you know that you spent enough time on that stone, on that side, and you're ready to flip over or to change to a different stone. But if you don't feel a burr, you haven't spent enough time on that stone. And I said there'd be a 5th and final tip, and here it is. Your whetstone actually matters. If you have a cheap whetstone, as in one of those that you get from Amazon for 20 bucks, you're probably going to get the results that you paid for. You really need a good quality whetstone to get good quality output. So if you have one of these stones and you feel like you're doing everything right, but when you get your knife, it still isn't sharp, I would highly recommend picking up a better stone. If I were to recommend any stone, I would recommend this one here, and it's called a King double-sided stone. It has a 1000 grit side and a 5000 grit side. This isn't too much more expensive than those you find on Amazon. I think I bought it for about $50 a few years ago. This stone is built really well. It's not top of the line by any stretch, but I've been able to get a fantastic edge on it every single time, and it's held up for years, to be honest. So that is everything for today. Hopefully after this video, you figured out maybe where you're going wrong and how to fix that along the way. So if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe because we release content like this every single week. So until next week, happy cooking.